Welcome to the Power San Diego podcast. In this episode, Power San Diego Chairman Bill Powers explains how it came to be that San Diego's natural gas and electricity ended up being controlled by a single shareholder-owned corporation. Let's get into it. When does the story of SDGE begin?
In the 1880s.
Wow.
Yeah, they've been the provider to San Diego since 1882, I think.
Why'd we end up with that what happened in 1882?
Great question. At the time, and I will say this is my best guess because I don't have the exact story of how a private utility, established itself permanently at that time, but I'm familiar with many stories of this type. And back at that time, there was a struggle going on throughout the country. It was almost like the dot-com struggle of its day, where you have a new technology coming on the scene in, say, 1870. It's a novelty. By 1880 or so, it's becoming more and more a need, a necessity. People are adopting it. They want it. And so there was a big bull rush of private entrepreneurial companies fighting for this obviously growing demand that appeared to be almost unlimited. But what was happening was chaotic. And in a lot of places, the quality was poor, the price was high, they're tearing up the streets, they're putting in everybody. It's like what we see with Cox and, all of the cell providers, just one day your street's torn up to put wires in, and 2 weeks later the street's torn up again to put wires in. That kind of more chaotic then than now. And so initially kind of an entrepreneurial private activity that was quickly becoming a critical service to the community, and where a lot of local governments were going, hey, we got to get a handle on this. This is not working with this private model. We are going to establish a public alternative to this. And so that battle was really, its heyday was like 1880 to 1910. The city of San Diego did not take that service at the time. And even when the charter established, that's the city's responsibility to provide electric service to its residents. However, the city has the option, which it has always taken, to franchise out that service, to contract it out. A lot of California cities and across the nation did not do that. For example, Los Angeles is a public electric utility. Imperial Irrigation District is a public electric service territory. City of Anaheim, City of Riverside, Sacramento, they're all not-for-profit public electric entities. And so most of them were established during that heyday period, though there have been dozens of new not-for-profit public utilities established in the last 20 to 30 years. But the heyday was some time ago.
Right. It seems like often these things sort of self-correct, where something is privately held and then we go, oh, actually, this is kind of too important. This should be in the hands of local government, and then it's not private anymore. Why has SDGE been so resilient at making tons of money for its shareholders?
Well, a couple of points on this. One is the franchise agreement. I think the first franchise agreement that I'm aware of was signed in 1920 between the city and SDGE. It was a 50-year agreement that was then renewed in 1970. But it was interesting, to answer your question, in 1970, and there was a dogfight in San Diego over taking that utility public in 1970. And the only reason, at least in the record, that we didn't convert to public electric power in 1970 is that was a time of, I think, high inflation and high interest rates. And the consultant to the city said, look, under other circumstances, you definitely should be transitioning to a public electric utility or a public utility, because it's also gas. But with interest rates at this high level at this point in time, it's just not an auspicious moment to do it. And so at that time, they had also discussed a shorter term for the franchise agreement so that future councils could reconsider. But ultimately, as seems to happen often in our town, the corporate entity ended up with a very sweet deal. They got another 50-year franchise agreement. So we had another big battle in 2020 and 2021 here over the fact that we needed an easy off-ramp to public power if our investor and utility, continue to behave in a high-handed way. And We almost got there. We got that vote on the franchise agreement pushed back from one administration on the way out, Faulkner, to the new administration, Gloria. But ultimately, SDGE ended up with another very good deal, essentially a 20-year franchise agreement with no off-ramps to public power that were any different, really, than what they had in the prior agreement. So how does this happen? How is it that something that isn't working or isn't working well is so difficult to take back for the public?
To make sure that I've got this clear, SDG&E is a very standard corporation. It's set up basically the way that like Nike is, right? You have a CEO, you have shareholders who buy stocks. Is that broadly accurate?
Yes.
So what we have is a situation where we have an essential service, and that is in San Diego, we get that electricity from a for-profit company whose sole purpose is to make as much money for its shareholders as possible via selling us electricity. And if we don't want to go with them, there is absolutely nothing we can do about it because they are the only provider. Have I got that right?
Yes. And where I would say that the analogy with Nike diverges is Nike is in a competitive market, whereas this is a monopoly, that a franchise monopoly, and there is a regulator, but there is no competition.
Thank you so much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Power San Diego. We're working to get a measure onto this year's ballot that will take San Diego's gas and electricity out of the hands of shareholders and put it into the hands of you and me. You know, the people who live in San Diego. It'll lower our energy rates, which are among the highest in the country. It'll also make it possible for us to keep leading the country in solar so the city can get to net zero carbon emissions. We're stoked about this, but we need your help. The quickest, simplest, and most important thing you can do is sign a petition to get this ballot initiative onto the ballot. Right now, there's nothing this campaign needs more than signatures. To find out where and when folks are collecting signatures, head over to the website wearepowersandiego.com and go to the Events tab. Even better, you can sign up to volunteer and collect signatures yourself. Even if you just get signatures from your friends and family, every little bit helps. We've got a link to the website and a bunch of other useful links in the show notes. And our theme music is Canticle of the Sun by local band Church Surf. Check them out.